to introduce tonight's speaker, RT Custer, one of the founders of Vortic Watches. Thank you, RT.
All right, thanks, Katie. Thanks for everyone coming tonight. Tyler and I are here, and we'll be trading off halfway through, talking about basically our story, a little bit of how it's made around what we call the American Artisan Series, part of Vortic Watch Company, the pocket watch conversions that we make, and digging into a little bit about how each component is made, and some of our frequently asked questions at the end, and then Todd will answer any questions from the audience also at the end. So with that, we'll get rolling. So this is me on the right and Tyler on the left, and one of our products we call the Boston on the right. Basically, we name all of our pocket watch conversions, all the American Artisan Series, based on where they were originally made. So the Waltham Watch Company was just outside Boston, Massachusetts, so we call that the Boston. And just a little bit about, I guess, how we got into it. You know, it's one of the questions we get a lot. Tyler and I are in our mid-20s. We had this idea back at Penn State when we were in college. And we really, you know, one day we got to talking, and we both really liked watches, and we were both passionate about manufacturing, American-made, and, you know, how it's made and all of that. And, you know, we did a lot of research on, you know, whether or not we could make our own watch, you know, if we could start our own watch brand. And we had a lot of ideas around that. And we wanted to determine if we could make everything in the United States, you know, just as a goal. You know, we were under the assumption, like many, that, you know, companies like Shinola, when they said American made, you know, everything was made in the United States, including the movement. That was our original assumption with a lot of those type of companies. And when we started digging into it, you know, and getting more educated about American manufacturing in the watch industry, we realized that, you know, that's very difficult. It's very difficult to make a movement, and not many people do it, and no one did it, you know, back in when we started here. And no one's done it on the scale since these old pocket watch companies. We call them the Great American Watch Companies on our website. And so, you know, as we researched more about the history of American watch manufacturing, we found Elgin, Waltham, Hamilton, etc. And we got really passionate about these movements when we also found out that many of them were being scrapped for their gold or silver case. And the movement, which was the thing that we were the most passionate about, was basically trash, you know, to the average person. And so one of our goals as a company is to salvage, restore, and preserve the history of American watch manufacturing and watchmaking, and just educate the general consumer as much as we can on what American-made really is, and how, you know, a lot of people use that term fairly loosely. And then we also just wanted to build truly and completely American-made watches and determine if that was even possible to do. And we did it, and we'd like to share that with you, you know, today. So a little bit more about our story. You know, just like a lot of startups, we started in my garage. This is a picture literally of my garage 3 years ago. And back in December of 2014, we launched a Kickstarter on Kickstarter.com. It's a crowdfunding website. We basically asked for $10,000 to start the company and described our idea. You know, we want to salvage these old pocket watch movements, turn them into wristwatches using 3D printed metals and completely American-made components. And we filmed that story and our goal in the garage and put that on the internet for everyone to see. We hit our $10,000 goal in about 12 hours, and over the course of 30 days we raised just a little bit over $41,000, and that's what we used to start the company. And so a lot of the pictures that Tyler and I included in this presentation are behind the scenes. You know, we wanted to dig up some of these old pictures, from our phones, from our cameras, and share them with everyone. Some of them are from our Instagram, and you can find some of these online, but some we haven't seen since we took them, so it was kind of fun putting this together. But the upper left picture is actually the 3D printer that we first started using. It's a Formlabs plastic printer. And all of our original cases we 3D printed out of plastic just to test to make sure that our ideas were functional and that they would work. And as you can see, those are our first prototypes there at the bottom, and one of our first full working models there in the top center. And so the idea of this first pocket watch conversion case, part of our American Artisan series, we call it version 1, was to make something extremely simple that we could take any size of pocket watch and convert it fairly easily. And to do that, with not a whole lot of money and without machines, is very difficult. And we came up with this 2-piece sandwich case, and you can see a cross section there, literally on the left side, with the glass. Everything is just sandwiched in there. And that was our original idea. And if you look at the bottom right picture, the engineering behind the idea was standardize as much of the metal as we could. So we had 6 size, 12 size, 16 size, some open face, some hunting, 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And we had to accommodate all of those sizes, and so we standardized as much as we could about the metal case, and then we 3D printed a plastic clear insert to go in the inside. And that insert, the plastic piece, is custom made for every single watch because, as some of you know, the model of a movement means that some of the bridges and plates are different, and so the outer contours of that movement are different, so we have to hold it differently. And really the bottom line of this concept was 3D print the metal. You have 2 cases, and then in theory you just have to drill a couple holes, tap a couple holes, and it's done. And so that's where we started. And so this is a layout of a movement and a case and some of our other parts. You can see we actually reverse engineered the original stem and sleeve system. That's the top center. There's a couple under the crown. And we tried to make that standardized for every single watch, 12 size and a 16 size. They all use the same sleeve system. For us, we just alter the stem slightly to fit the movement. And that's actually the part that I think we're the most proud of, is standardizing a lot of our case around thousands of different movements, and they all work. So it's been a lot of fun to put this all together. But if I can, I'm going to go out here, and I'll use this animation. Hopefully it'll work. I'll go really slow to describe how the original, we call it version 1 case, works. And so you have your buckle and your strap. We call this right here the band bar and screws. So that's our our attachment to the lugs of the strap. And then we have our crown. We have our stem and the sleeve, which acts basically as a sphincter for the stem. And that sleeve can be screwed into this case. A little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the movement, depending on how big that movement is, and adjust for the tolerance of the cases. And then we have our case, 1/2 of the metal case. We have our plastic insert, and we have our Corning Gorilla Glass crystal for the front, our movement and dial, and then the other side of the case and strap. And so as you can see, as I move this all together, that is literally how it is assembled from one side to the other and then disassembled. And so those are all the components that go into the American Artisan Series version 1. Let's see if I can go back. And this is another layout. This is actually a 6-size Elgin, and just to show you a different movement. A lot of people ask us, one of the first questions we get in the sales process, or at the retail stores that sell our watches, is are the movements restored, and how does that process work? We won't go into a lot of that today because we want to focus on our engineering, the case, our new cases, and all that. But yes, every movement is completely overhauled, completely restored. I'm sure we have some watchmakers listening tonight. You know, I'm an engineer. Went to school for industrial engineering, and watchmaking is a whole nother level of engineering. And so I have a lot of respect for our employees and the contract watchmakers that we work with, and really all the watchmakers that work on our pieces, because there's a lot of literally moving parts, and when you take it all apart, put it back together, and it runs, especially being 100 years old or more, you know, we have a lot of fun doing what we do, and restoring these old movements, you know, really is a passion, and we're glad we can do it. So just another layout there. These are a few behind-the-scenes pictures of our first production run, you know. So like I said, in theory we could just do all that with drilling and tapping, but when we went to make hundreds at the same time, it was a little bit different. So we actually designed a fixture to fit all the different case halves, and put that in a CNC machine and run off a bunch at once. And you can just see kind of how we hold that case in there. And then on the bottom right, that's a measurement machine that we use to just understand the tolerances, because the case is 3D printed from a mixture of steel and bronze, and it's not perfect. It's not like it was forged. Some of them are a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, more round, less round, etc. And that really threw us a curveball, and was something we had to understand a little bit better. So that was our measurement process. These are on the left side. You can see a fully assembled watch with a light behind it, so you can see our clear insert that we call it, the plastic piece. Basically, that's the gap that's filling that gap. You can see the light coming through there, how it's all held together there. And then the bottom is what we call our polished case. That is fresh off the machine, as it were, just freshly 3D printed. The metal that we used in our version 1 cases, that was printed by X1 company in Pittsburgh, and it's 85% steel, and originally you print with steel and nylon in a mixture of powdered metal, and then you pour bronze into that after it's printed, and the bronze infiltrates that metal, burns out the nylon, and you're left with that solid structure, now 15% bronze. And the right side, you can see under a microscope, that's your bronze infiltrated into the steel. And that's, you know, like I said, that's part of our passion behind creating this, is the 3D printing aspect, and that's, you know, what we did in school, bringing that in and tying that in with these old movements. You know, one reporter said it was a beautiful clash of old and new, and that's really what we strive for. Just a few more pictures of kind of assembling, and, you know, the methods we use. Top left is an engineering drawing of our band bar system, you know, how the screw goes through the lug and into the band bar. Very simple cylindrical band bar is how it works. You know, simple thread on one side and tap on the other. And then you can see our original design used a 000 120 screw, which, as some of you might know, is very, very small. And we've enhanced that now and doubled that size, and it's much easier to do now, but we have that picture on the upper right to remember how small and frustrating that first band bar system was. And then all of our first straps, we actually cut and stitched ourselves in literally the garage for a while. Our first, what would you say, Tyler, 50, 40 watches were handmade straps. And then we partnered with Hadley Roma, which we'll talk about a little bit later with some of our new straps, to make them for us and just increase the quality and production levels. Those are, as some of you might know, very hard to make. And then just wanted to talk a little bit about the box, the packaging. All of our boxes are handmade here in Fort Collins, out of walnut. and we do all the assembly of the box here. We have a woodworker actually in our shop now that cuts and puts together all the wood, and then we hand cut all the leather, put all the hardware on, and that is the American Artisan Series display watch box. That came with all of our version 1 watches, and it was inspired by the trunks on the railroad. Originally, that's where we got the idea for that design. And then before we transition to what we call version 2 watches, we just want to talk a little bit and share some of our favorite version 1 watches that we made over the last couple of years. This one is the Boston 34. It's a 1923 Waltham Riverside 21 jewel 12 size movement. That is a nickel plated case that it's in. Shot there on Tyler's wrist. The 12 size is a 47 millimeter watch in diameter. And all of our watches, if I didn't say it before, feature an exhibition back so you can see the original movement. Part of our passion is showing off that original craftsmanship and beauty of engineering that the original watch manufacturers did. And I think we can all agree that's one of our favorite watches. As well as this, one of the first few we ever made, the Chicago 6. That's a 1912 Elgin 382 with a 3-finger bridge, gorgeous movement, 16 size. And then the dial, some customers come to us with specific requests, and this customer knew what they were talking about and chose this dial. And dials like this, the Montgomery style, and adding the 24-hour marks, very rare, very fun to look at, and just like all of our watches, this is a true conversation piece, the Chicago 6. And then just adding in a few more here to show, I guess, the variety. Every single watch we build is one of a kind. They all have their own story. Some we know the story, like the top 2. Those are what we call Heritage Edition watches. Those were movements from a grandfather, so the Boston 127 was a customer from Waltham, Massachusetts. His grandfather gave him that movement, inherited the movement, passed it on, and we built that watch into a watch for his daughter. And then we also have the upper right, the digital second readout on that dial was one of the first ones of that version that we saw. Really beautiful dial on that, and that again was a heritage piece, someone's grandfather's pocket watch that we were able to restore and preserve in a wristwatch for them. Bottom left is the Boston 84. That's one of the oldest movements that we've worked on. I believe that was 1894. This is when that Waltham movement was done, a conversion dial, 6 size. Just, the patina on those bottom 2 watches is what we wanted to show here. And, many people come to us and ask if we can restore, the dial as well. And actually, a lot of our customers prefer the dial to be in its original state. You can see the patina, you can see the hairline cracks in the enamel, and that just shows that it is in fact 100 or more years old, and adds to the story, adds to the character. And the character of the Boston 126 was evident when that watch, I think, sold before we even really listed it online. So that was just a really fun watch to build, and one of our first watches featuring what we have our raw copper crown, which now we feature option on the version 2 watches. And then, just so we don't talk about Waltham the whole time and what we call the Boston, we'll throw in some of our favorite Springfield or Illinois Watch Company movements. Some of the Illinois movements were highly decorated. We see some really beautiful patina on their dials. Really interesting dials, a lot of stories that go into this, like the bottom left dial, for instance, on the Springfield 09. Just very different than your typical traditional enamel, your white enamel that you see on a lot of old pocket watches. So regardless to say, we have a lot of fun and we learn a lot every time we pick up one of these new pocket watches. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and he's going to talk about what we call version 2 of the American Artisan Series. All right, hello everyone. This is Tyler Wolf. I helped start Vortic with RT when we were in college, and I'm here to talk about the second version of our American Artisan Series. And it's definitely what we're most excited about right now, because what we did is we took our version 1 product and took all of the feedback and any shortcomings we had with assembly and rolled it all up into one really cool product that we're really excited about. And we'll start going through these slides and show you how it's made. One of the biggest differences with this new case compared to our version 1 case is that it's 3D printed from titanium. So this metal is significantly lighter, significantly stronger, and we're printing it in one piece. So we have the body of the case, which is that top piece, and then we have a screw-on stainless steel back. We're taking a printed titanium piece, we're milling it out and machining it, and then we are using a cam lock system to attach the back piece. We have both crystals pressed into the piece here on the top and bottom. We have a similar stem and sleeve system to our version 1 product, but we have put many updates into the new product that are hard to show every single one. The design drawing you see right here is a section view of a SolidWorks drawing. And this is actually one of our first prototypes, so this isn't 100% accurate to our current watch, but we'll move on. So this is what it looks like when you're setting up a build plate for the newer process that we're using. RT described the process of printing our V1 cases with a mixture of stainless steel and bronze. The new process that we're using that is more accurate and just kind of the highest level of metal 3D printing is called DMLS, direct metal laser sintering. And what we're using is a powder bed process. So within the machine, you have a layer of powder. This is pure titanium powdered metal, and a laser comes across and fuses together each one of those layers one at a time. So you start with a powder bed. It has an arm that comes across and smooths that out. It fuses that layer together and then lays down another layer of powder, smooths that out to a very specific layer thickness, and you end with a full tray of titanium powder parts within the titanium powder. So you can see here, this is the guys at Imperial Machine and Tool in New Jersey taking the parts off of the printer. So you can see on the left they're using a brush to brush out the extra powdered titanium, and on the right you can see what those parts look like fresh off the printer before they've even been scraped off the build plate. And here's some more pictures. On the bottom right you can see that machine that they use. They're pretty industrial machines. They have a fully enclosed build space. They're filled with argon gas. Very expensive machines, and it's pretty amazing what they can do. Earlier last year, we got a grant from Penn State University to research some of the properties of metal 3D printing. We wanted to find out for ourselves what really are we working with. And the moral of the story is that this is a fully solid metal part. When you machine it, it machines just like a solid block of titanium. It's not porous, it's just as strong. There are a lot of benefits to metal 3D printing. This print in particular is interesting. You can see the support structure underneath the shape. And what that support structure does is it holds the shape that you're printing to the build plate. And because you're firing a laser at this powder, you're heating it up and cooling it down very quickly. So this support structure helps hold everything in place and keep it from warping. On this specific print, this was actually a failed print because they set it up incorrectly
in the build, and their spacing between the supports and the case was off. So you can see, especially on the case tube there, the support has disconnected from the shape and has allowed that case tube to kind of warp upwards. So that's a good example of what can go wrong with metal 3D printing. After we get the prints from the printer, we tumble them in both ceramic and stainless steel media. Normally we use BBs for the stainless steel, and you can see in the ceramic we use a mixture of triangles, cylinders, and so forth. We use the ceramic media for a rough first, taking off some of the rough edges of the metal 3D printing. The cases come off the printer very coarse. They almost feel like sandpaper. So they go in with bigger ceramic media, tumble for around 24 hours, and then we put them in with stainless steel media and smooth them out for about another 24 hours. So this is, on the left, a picture of one of the titanium cases with the support structure still on it, and then the picture on the right is after the internal part of the case is milled. So we mill off all of that support structure, and some of the features that you're seeing inside of that case are the cams and keys for the insert. So that back piece is keyed to be in a specific spot every time you give it a quarter turn, and it will lock into place. And then those keys there keep the movement from rotating. So the insert itself has bump outs there to keep it from rotating. And there on the left you can see the little locking bump out on the cam of one of the back pieces. And that just gives it a nice solid click when it turns into place. And then on the right you can see some cases right after they came off the machinist's machine. On the left we're looking at one of the new case tubes on the V2 watches. We are milling that entire tube now. We have a dual O-ring system there that seals with the crown, and the crown actually extends into that case tube. So we've made our setting and winding system significantly more stable and also made it watertight. And right here you can see one of our machine back pieces being laser engraved. We have an epilogue laser in our shop that we use to engrave, many different things. It can cut soft metals, and it can mark almost any metal, and it can also engrave any design into soft materials like leather and cork. So we use that quite a bit. And here's an example of us blackening some cases. There's a little bit more flame here than there should be. It definitely looks better in a picture when you're seeing this. But what we do is actually use simple WD-40. We dip the case in the WD-40, put it into the kiln at about 1500 degrees. We let it sit in there for about 35 seconds, take it back out, quench it again in the WD-40, and repeat that process somewhere between 10 and 15 times. So what we're doing is taking the carbon from the oil and baking it into the surface of the titanium. And like you can see in the bottom right picture, it gives us a really unique jet black finish that is not really just a standard black. When you look at it and see the facets in the case, it really has a unique look to it. And here you can see one of our watches, one of our V2 watches being put together. Our new system, what we do is we have the case turned over on its front. There is a plastic top ring that goes in, and then the movement is put in with the stem and sleeve already located in the case. Then we follow the movement in with a contoured back piece. And this insert is printed from gray, what's the material now? It's having some trouble thinking of the exact material that these inserts are printed out of, but they're printed on an FDM machine down in Loveland, and they follow in the movement and then key it into those 4 little cutouts there to keep it from rotating. And here are some of our hardware. We did quite a few updates on the hardware for this new version. For example, our band bar that RT spoke about earlier now has, before we had 2 screws on either side of a threaded bar. Now we have just a bar and 1 screw, and the bar has an oval head to keep it from rotating. We were having some problems with straps rotating and it loosening the screws, and obviously you don't want straps to fall off. So we have a new band fastening system that really locks in the strap and makes it really easy to change out that strap. These are some images of our original crowns. The new crowns actually extend into the case tube and seal with the case tube, so they have a much more solid feel. Very similar look to our V1 crowns, just with a more solid feel. We machine those and most of our small Swiss turn components at Swiss-O-Matic in Montrose, Colorado. And all of their parts are turned out of a copper alloy. And to get those nickel and gold looks, we plate the pieces in our shop. Another one of the upgrades that we've made is to the actual stem and sleeve itself. We've made the stem significantly stronger. We've really dialed in our travel distance between set and wind. We've made the threads a lot finer, so we get a lot finer adjustment, and we're able to achieve a lot better feel with our setting and winding transition. And the new sleeve actually mimics an old sleeve more than our original sleeve, and it has that rounded nose on it. It's difficult to describe how that rounded nose really improves the function, but that makes it last significantly longer after you're setting and winding the watch hundreds and hundreds of times. And another additional component is a locking washer. So before we just had that sleeve threaded in there, and we get the tap to thread in really tightly to hold that sleeve there. Now we also use a locking washer. So the sleeve goes in from the outside of the case, and then it's followed by a locking washer that is really just a threaded washer that comes in behind the sleeves and locks it into place with some pressure. So those are some of the updates. It's hard to describe everything, but we're really excited about the new product. It's really been a pleasure to put it together. And we've made it so much more easier to assemble. That's kind of the inspiration behind introducing kits that anybody can use their own movement to build a watch. We're making it easy enough to assemble that somebody that's relatively new to the world of horology and watchmaking can hopefully figure it out. And that's about it for the V2. I'm going to hand it back over to RT.
Thanks, Tyler. So I'm going to talk just a little bit more about V2, but less on the technical side, more on some of the specific components, and then wrap it up here with our frequently asked questions that we get. So currently, this is a view of our website. Right now, we have a watch builder application on the website. If you haven't been there, we have some of our customers that are watch collectors spend several hours on this app, having a lot of fun. The first thing that you choose is your size. So right now, in the watch builder, we offer the 12 size and the 16 size in the version 2, and then we have all the movements and dials that we currently have just in our initial inventory in the shop. And each one has its own story. So we have the year it was made, the jewel count, where it was made, etc. And we even have a little bit more information under each movement if you click on the information button there. And so you can literally in this app design your own watch, see both the front and back by switching it here. We had a lot of fun working on this and building this as a tool. We can't make very many of these watches, so we can't have them in retailers all across the U.S. So this is as close as we can come virtually to being able to see and feel this custom watch before you buy it. And so we have other options, that Tyler was talking about. We call them raw and titanium. So our raw case is fresh off the printer, solid titanium. And then we have the blackened, the oil blackened process case. We have our raw copper alloy crown. We have nickel and gold as well. We have the round crown that is, inspired by the original pocket watch crowns, and then our knurled, more modern update to our crowns. And then we have all the straps. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit about our straps, and that's what's up next. You can choose the different strap that looks nicer on your watch, and bring that in here and see what it looks like fully built in the watch before you have to purchase. So that's our watch builder. I'll go back to the presentation. And so a little bit more about the straps. We have Hadley Roma is who makes our straps now. We have our traditional stitch, traditional cowhide straps made by Hadley Roma. And then we also offer the upgraded Horween Shell Cordovan straps. All of these, we try to make high quality, thick, so they fit the, I guess, feel of a larger watch, but still in a style that is traditional and elegant, so it doesn't throw off the fact that that is an old 100-year-old pocket watch on the inside of this watch. And so to do that, we spent a lot of time with the makers, and so that's me there with Nick Horween, the 4th generation in Chicago. Got to tour the Horween factory and see all those shells being made, and that's one of the most interesting experiences recently is just seeing how this is made. And a lot of people ask us, what is our true passion? Why do you have to make everything in America and that kind of stuff? And we always fall back on our tagline, which is America wasn't assembled, it was built. And for us, we like to understand how each individual component of the product was built, was made. And so Tyler and I have both met and seen how every single product, every single component in the watch, we've been to all of these places where it's made. We've met the owners and the people who actually do the work, and that to us is built. That to us is high quality. And that's really hard to do with a global supply chain. To make sure that every single component that goes into your product is completely high quality. And since it's all made here in the States, we can ensure that for every single watch, for every single customer. And on that note, we have the Smith shop who makes our V2 buckles. They are handmade in Detroit, so all of our buckles for the version 2, we looked far and wide for an American-made buckle, and we couldn't find one. So we asked the Smith shop in Detroit to make them for us, and they asked if it was okay if they would be handmade, and we love that. So that's how all of our buckles are made, literally forged and hammered into a watch buckle. That's been a fun project for them to work on, and a really interesting project for us to literally be able to design our own buckle from the ground up. And so, I guess what we have here is what's next for Vortic. And so I just have a few things here, and I'll see if I can just load them all. Yep. So we have the American Artisan Series version 2, which we're currently in production on the 12 size. We're starting production on the 16 size here in a month or so, and we'll catch up with all of the pre-orders that we've had for those 16 size version 2 watches. Then we move on to the Railroad Edition. The Railroad Edition, for those of you who know the history of pocket watches in America, the railroad grade pocket watches are the most sought after, and in our travels buying from estate sales and antique shops, and trying to buy hundreds of movements at once, we don't always get the pendant set movements, and we end up finding, unfortunately, a lot of really high grade railroad grade pocket watches that have been, a lot of those cases were gold, and so those get scrapped just as frequently, like I said, unfortunately, because those are the ones that are the most valuable and have a lot of history there. And so we want to be able to preserve those. And so we have our Railroad Edition advertised on our website now as pre-orders. We'll be doing our final engineering. We've had several customers order that already, and so we want to give you know, those final engineering and prototypes to those first customers to get feedback, and then go into production on the Railroad Edition, which basically looks just like our current watch, the American Artisan Series, but has a removable front of the watch. The front lip of the watch comes off the bezel, so you can get to that lever set mechanism, and those have been a lot of fun to work on. Really excited about that. And we always get the question of, you know, what about the women in our lives? You know, can I buy a watch for my wife or what have you? And you know, we also have very small movements that we find, the 0 size and the 6 size. And so we're launching the American Artisan Series for her, which are necklaces that feature those 0 size and 6 size more fragile movements, you know, that we can really put and mount into something that is more jewelry and less watch. So we're really, you know, excited to get feedback on that idea and get into that idea. Then we have our Journeyman Series, which is our fully modern watch. We are just in the engineering process with that on the movement side with Cameron Weiss, just working out the details of the movement itself, and then we can get into production and distribution in the fall to our retailers. And then one of the things that you know, we wanted to share, especially with this audience, you know, at the national convention, we'll be there, and we want to start offering do-it-yourself conversion kits. And so for at least the 12 size and the 16 size, if you are a watchmaker or, you know, have a jewelry store or are a hobbyist that has the skill to be able to assemble a watch like this by yourself, and you already have your movement and you know how to restore the movement, then we can offer you something to be a fun project that you can basically build one of our watches yourself. So I'm really excited about that, and you know, really anxious to get feedback, you know, directly from customers at that national convention when we start talking about that. So just a couple of pictures, you know, their first designs and our first mock-ups for her, you know, using a 6 size Elgin movement there. We found a lot of really beautiful smaller movements, and that one's in sterling silver, but obviously, you know, we can do platinum, gold, whatever the customer likes on that. And then, you know, just working on the Journeyman Series, we've learned a lot about what it takes to build a modern watch. I'm really excited for this. Our first prototype getting milled there on the bottom left. Some of our first dials. We're bringing back the Grand Few enamel dials, making those in our shop. That's one of our first ones we made there on the top left. Got to meet Cameron Weiss out in California and talk about production of the movements and figure out how many we can actually make and what goes into it. And really our goal out of that is to make what we call the Power Reserve, which is, you know, one of our most fun complications, you know, on an old pocket watch is the Power Reserve indicator. And we're really excited, and that's really our passion behind making a modern watch, is replicating that style. So I like to start with these two frequently asked questions because these are the two most asked questions, and we get them asked pretty much in equal parts. Why are your watches so expensive, or why are your watches so cheap? And so just want to talk about, you know, our pricing model. You know, our prices are directly based on our cost of goods, and we're really proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and we feel that our price points are just perfect for where we are. And you know, obviously we can make a 12 size Elgin 15 jewel movement that we call the Chicago much more inexpensively than something that's railroad grade, that's very hard to find, that's, you know, hard to work on, less parts, you know, things like that. And so our prices range significantly. You know, a lot of our friends who are in their 20s say, you know, I can only afford your base models, but that's okay, because, you know, a lot of those customers, they buy it because of the story, because of the history, you know, what have you. And then we also have collectors on the other side, like a gentleman that came to us a few weeks back, and he actually now owns 4 of our watches. He set aside $10,000 to buy himself a Rolex, and realized that he could have an entire collection of our watches for that amount of money. And so I think for pricing, to really answer that question, it's in the eye of the beholder, but you know, that is our focus, is to maintain an achievable price by focusing on all of the things that we just talked about, and making them standardized, and doing a lot more things ourselves. We get the question of, you know, are pocket watch movements okay to wear on the wrist a lot? And you know, the way I like to talk about that is, you know, first of all, these pocket watches were made in a time when things were made the right way. You know, these pocket watches were made to be worn and used on a daily basis in a working environment. You know, if you think of the average person today, you know, in 2017 versus in 1917, when likely this Illinois movement was made, you know, the average person today is a lot more sedentary than a person back then. And so these pocket watches were made to keep up with the average person, and so they were built the right way, and they can survive a lot. The second point I usually make on that when we get that question is, you know, we build one-of-a-kind pieces of American history. This is a conversation piece. You know, this is a piece of art that you get to wear on your wrist that just so happens to tell time, and it's 100 years old on the inside. So you should treat it as such. You know, these are dress watches. If you want to go hiking or golfing in your watch, recommend a G-Shock. So you know, this is what we do is build those high-quality dress watches. And then, you know, the next question, and I'm just going to throw all these up here so they answer everything here. So the fourth question kind of leads into that, and it's what if something happens? You know, who knows? We do have a warranty on all of our finished watches. We offer a 2-year revolving warranty. Basically, as long as we see your watch every couple years, we inspect it, make sure it's still running in Cuban time, then we'll warranty it for another 2 years. If it needs to be overhauled, if it needs to be serviced, if it needs to be regulated, we would do that at that time. But you are covered, and we do have that revolving warranty that is for life if it revolves and you take care of your watch. These watches were made to run forever, and half the ones that we find, you know, in a box, they're 100 years old, and we wind them up and they still run. You know, so that's just amazing, and we feel confident that they'll keep running for another 100 years. The other question we get a lot is, where does the name Vortic come from? It's actually a mixture of vortex and tick-tock. So Vortic. Vortex, you know, involves an idea we had about a bezel in the beginning of the company, and then tick-tock, obviously. So we merged those two names into Vortic, and that's the name of our company. And then, you know, I guess why 3D printing is kind of the question. You know, why do we not just mill the cases traditionally? So first of all, you know, that's kind of where we came from. In engineering school at Penn State, we were just in the thick of metal 3D printing. Penn State has a lot of patents and a lot of research on printing, especially in titanium. And so we were inspired by that and realized that it would work really well for us. Second of all, we do low run production. You know, we only made a couple hundred watches last year, and so we can't afford the same machines that would run thousands of cases at once, or the minimum orders, you know, that a lot of those other companies have. And so so printing works for us as far as you know, it's fairly comparable when you're talking about less than 1,000 units as far as cost comes from. And then it's actually really sustainable because if you think about printing this case, there's not a whole lot of waste that goes into it, because when you print it, you don't have to, you only print what you need, really. You know, you have those support structures that Tyler talked about, but if you think about milling this from a block of titanium, the entire center cylinder where the movement goes would be completely wasted titanium. And then think about the tools that you would need to burn through to cut away all that titanium. From an engineering and sustainability standpoint, it actually makes a lot of sense to 3D print it. And so then we also get, can I convert my own pocket watch? Yes, within reason. Obviously if it's 12 size, 16 size pendant set and open face, that makes it easier for us because we already have those cases ready to go. If it's not, it can be done. It's just a matter of time. We just need the time to engineer the case that fits yours correctly. And obviously the movement has to be able to be restored. So, that process can be started on our website or by giving us a call. We love talking about those projects and working on that. And then, the final question that we come up with here is, that we get a lot, is once you eventually run out of movements, are there enough pocket watches in the world for you to do this year over year? And, just thinking about the old pocket watch companies, between Elgin, Waltham, and Illinois, you're talking tens of millions of movements that were manufactured back in the day, and that's just 3 companies. There's a dozen or more pocket watch companies that had significant production. And so I guess eventually it might get harder to find, but right now there's a lot of them out there. And like we started the story and where we came from, unfortunately a lot of those pocket watches have no use now, and the cases are getting scrapped, especially back in 2008 when silver prices were at their all-time high. They were getting scrapped like crazy. And so there's a lot of them out there, and we're not concerned as much for finding the movements, I guess, as we are about the skilled trade of watchmakers and having enough people and labor to actually restore them. That's the concern that we have, and thankfully there are schools out there and young people like us that are willing to learn, and we've met a lot of those people, and we're really excited that that skilled trade is coming back, and the use for it is being warranted here. And so that's all we have for today. I think we can take some questions from the audience, anyone that's here, but just in case you forget your question, have to come back to us in some way. Website and my email address and our business phone number are all there on the top. You can reach us in any way that you prefer there, and we'd love to answer your questions or talk to you about a watch.
Thank you, RT. We're now going to start answering the questions submitted during the presentation, and just as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So going through these questions, first question is from Dale, and he says, how long does the titanium printing take?
That's a really good question. So the way we think about 3D printing in any way, but the method of 3D printing is you start with the build plate. So the build area is a square, and on most printers, especially the metal printers, that square can be 12 by 12 inches or 18 by 18. And the most efficient way to print in a production standpoint, like what we do, is to fill up that build plate. Every time you hit go on the printer, it takes a certain amount of energy to pass that laser over the entire build area over and over and over again. So the more densely packed your parts are on the build plate, the more efficient that is. But if we only put one case, right in the center, it really wouldn't take that long. So if we think about the entire build plate, I know the first time Imperial did our first build plate, they let it run overnight. So it was a several hour process that it took to build an entire build plate from the ground up, and hundreds of layers that go into there. But if we were just to print one, which wouldn't be efficient from an energy standpoint, it wouldn't take, I would say, maybe 30 minutes to an hour at most to print one single case on a build plate.
Okay. Our next question is from Darcy, and she said, do you still do custom watches where the client provides, for example, an heirloom watch?
Yeah, Yep, and I think I probably answered most of that on the end of the presentation there. But like I said, we really like to just have a conversation with you first to understand, what we're getting ourselves into on the actual movement. And the first thing we ask is to send pictures of the pocket watch movement. And we can usually tell by either the serial number on the back or just by looking at the front and back what size it is, what orientation it is, whether it's pendant set or lever set, and whether it can or cannot be converted. And we start with that, and if it can, and it looks like it might be a good candidate, then we start the process, and the process is sending the movement to us for restoration and quote, and designing that case. And like I said, if it's one of our standard cases, minimal costs as far as that goes on the engineering side. And if it's lever set or detent or something that's a little bit different, we just handle that on a case-by-case basis. But those are a lot of fun to work on, and if you do have one or has a friend that has one, we'd love to see it.
Okay. Our next question is from Robert. Where do you obtain your movements, and do the customers get to send their movements in for conversion, which you kind of answered that part already, and are you currently able to make cases for Tank or Tourneau model wristwatches?
You might have to repeat the third part.
Okay.
But just to answer the first one, I think the second one we covered. The first part of the question, a lot of our movements come from antique shops, antique dealers, estate sales. A jewelry store goes out of business, they have a huge box of pocket watches in the back. And really what we've learned is we started approaching places with big signs out front that say we buy gold, because those types of businesses end up seeing a lot of pocket watches. And as we've done that, over the last few years, we've met a lot of people who are in that business of buying, selling, and trading vintage watches, wristwatches and pocket watches, and that type of person ends up having a lot of old movements that they don't know what to do with because they don't have enough cases, for them, or the cases are gone. And so that's where we end up getting a lot of them, and most of them geographically come from the Northeast. And you get closer to Waltham, Massachusetts, you're going to find a lot more Waltham pocket watches. But we grew up in Pennsylvania, and there's antique shops everywhere in southeastern PA. So we have a lot of resources back home, and gives us a great excuse to go home and see our families every so often. So that's a win-win. But if you could repeat the third part of the question, I really catch it.
He said, are you currently able to make cases for Tank or Tourneau model wristwatches?
Yeah, we really, as of now, we're trying to kind of simplify our model and really focus in on American-made pocket watches. The complicated answer is that we can do anything, and like RT said, we handle some of those things on a case-by-case basis depending on what the watch looks like and what kind of features it has and what type of mechanisms it uses. But like I said, it's just a case-by-case basis, so you really have to send us some pictures and have a conversation with us about the watch.
Yeah, we have a lot of submissions and a lot of really great ideas submitted from customers and collectors alike. About chronographs and military pocket watches and things like that, and we would love to get into that, and we definitely will. We just need to really establish that groundwork as a company, and the more machines that we bring in-house and the more capabilities we have here in Colorado, the more flexibility we have on that. And so that's one of our focuses this year is to grow that capability for that flexibility.
But yeah, like I said, we focus on American-made watch brands and some of the most popular sizes. So if it's a 0 size, 6 size, 12 size, or 16 size pendant set watch, those are what we build our normal Artisan Series cases to handle, and we can also, or will also be able to handle 16 size railroad grade movements as well.
Yep, in the short term. So.
Okay, the next question is, on your Artisan series, are you reusing the original mainsprings, using new or old stock, or sourcing from the manufacturer?
The general answer to that is yes, to just blanket answer. That is a definite case-by-case basis. So
the majority of the mainsprings are replaced.
Yeah,
but
because
some
they
of
have
them
to be.
Some of them don't need to be. We definitely look at that. That's one of the components that when we're looking at these movements is a major thing that goes bad over time. So we replace most of those, but some of them don't get replaced if they're in really good shape.
Yeah, just depends on the quality of that movement. Some of the movements we find and they get submitted to us, sat in a clean room, at a jewelry store for the last few decades, and so they're in just perfect shape, or someone kept it in their house, under a glass dome, and serviced it, every couple of years, so it's just in great shape. And then obviously we have the total reverse of that, where it was literally in a box without its case, and the mainspring needs to be replaced along with sometimes a lot of other parts. So it really, really depends on each movement. And on each customer and what they want us to do, as far, especially on the dial side. If you want us to clean the dial, have a perfect enamel dial, or if you like some of that patina and patina metal dials that we showed.
Okay, the next question is from Susan. Can missing parts of the watch be 3D printed?
The answer to that is no. We can try. But we would end up having to machine the entire 3D print again to make it reach the tolerances and accuracy to be able to work within the watch. So it would really kind of be a redundant process and more difficult. We're just using regular bar stock to turn out a part or what have you. So the tolerances in 3D printing are not nearly what can be achieved with highly skilled micromachining. Like what is used for watch parts.
Yep. But we do get that question a lot, and that's a lot of fun to talk about. And we love to nerd out about 3D printing and all the future aspects of it. And that's a question that gets brought up a lot between other watch companies and us when we talk about what's next. And I'm sure someone will do it to scale eventually, but it's just not cost effective at the moment.
Yeah, the technology definitely will develop to that point, but it is not there yet.
Great question.
And Susan had a follow-up question with that. What other metals can be 3D printed?
That's a great question. Yeah. So when we first started out doing researching the different possibilities, the most inexpensive, I guess, or the easiest to access on a low scale was that first process that we talked about, which was 85% steel, 15% bronze. Now there's a lot more out there. We use titanium just for the capabilities and the aspects of titanium, but you can use cobalt chromium on the same machine, aluminum. Just solid aluminum can be used on the same machine. Stainless steel is an option for sure. And EOS, one of the big 3D printing, metal 3D printing companies, recently launched a few printers that can do precious metal. So gold, rose gold, silver. Obviously that is exponentially more expensive than what we're working on, as it's even more brand new and precious metal in powdered state. It costs a fair amount to make. But in the jewelry industry, we're seeing that a lot in just custom, completely one-of-a-kind rings and necklaces being 3D printed in their final state, which is a really interesting process, and we're definitely going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, essentially, if a metal can be powdered, it can be printed using the process that we use, that direct metal laser sintering process. After that point, it kind of comes down to the material properties and what lends itself better to the process. melting point, how it retains heat, and all of these things decide how quickly it can be printed, how structurally, what's its structural integrity, and these things. So with all that taken into account, they focus on certain printable metals, just like in machining, they focus on machinable metals. Not to say that they can't machine something that can't machine anything or can't print in anything.
Okay, our next question is from Scott. 2016 was a tough year for Switch watch retailers. How is the marketplace for your brand and conversions?
Yeah, so we've been reading a lot about how terrible 2016 was, and thinking about our numbers for 2016 and talking about all of that. So that's a great question. And as a new company, it certainly hasn't been easy to get the word out about us and sell a significant amount of watches in 2016. But we are insulated a fair amount by the fact that we have a very niche product. There aren't very many people in the world doing what we do. There are a few great selling points to our product, and as far as American made, and we use made in Colorado, and we're talking to Colorado retailers and customers. And then as far as the Swiss industry is concerned, what we've been hearing and reading is a lot about production and really targeting your production levels to meet the demand. If you can make just as many watches as you can sell, that's phenomenal. And from the Swiss perspective, they're pumping out watches. I mean, depending on the brand that you talk about, obviously, but pumping out watches and shipping them all over the world, and they're dealing in a scale that is exponentially larger than ours. We made just a couple of hundred watches, a few hundred watches in our lifetime. And so when you compare that to Rolex, who's making hundreds of watches a day, it's not really a fair comparison. But like I said, we've been insulated from a lot of that pain, just simply due to our size and the niche market. But we feel really confident that 2017 is going to be a great year for us. One, because we've refined the product to the point where we've eliminated a lot of the concerns that some customers had. The water resistancy is there now. It's lighter, it's smaller, it's more refined of a product, the American Artisan Series is. And we're launching several new products this year, as you saw from our plan. And so we're diversifying the company a little bit. And more people are starting to hear about us now, and when we approach retailers now, they're like, oh, we saw you in Watch Time, or we saw you on Revolution, or we heard about you in another publication, or I keep getting your retargeting ads online every time I open my browser now because I went to your website. And because people know who we are, at least to a certain extent now, those conversations with customers and retailers become a lot easier. So we're really optimistic, really excited for 2017, and at least for us, it shouldn't be too big of a deal.
Okay, another popular question is, do you make lever set versions?
Yeah, so lever set, is kind of what we call, at least in general right now, the railroad edition. So a lot of the lever set pocket watch movements were railroad grade. And so we're focused on making that what we call the railroad edition case, and really just trying to accommodate the most popular and sought after movement, or the highest quality, especially railroad grade movements. And so once we achieve that and we have that case made and we have that case available, especially in kits, I know that'll be a popular kit request is something for a 992B or something like that. But once we have that completed and we can alter where the movement slot is, and fit more and more lever set movements, then we should be able to do most lever set movements. But again, it's a case-by-case basis depending on when it was made and where it was made.
And to give a little bit shorter, straightforward answer. This year we will be able to do almost any American-made 16-size lever set watch movement.
Okay, another popular question is, would you consider remaking a pocket watch case?
We've actually had several people ask us recently if we can make a modern pocket watch. You know, no one's really making a nice modern pocket watch. And I think the answer to that question and to the question you just asked are kind of the same, and it's that with every product that we make, especially since we're in a niche, inside of a niche, you know, very small available market in general, when you look at the possible demand for a pocket watch case and compare, you know, put that into a matrix with the demand versus how quickly we could make them versus how inexpensively we could make them, and then what you could possibly charge for it, the numbers really don't add up from either making a pocket watch or making a pocket watch case. We wouldn't be able to make it inexpensively enough unless we made thousands and thousands and thousands of them like the old pocket watch case companies did. And so the short answer is not anytime soon, but that would be a really fun project.
Okay, our next question is, do you have to license the printing technology from Penn State?
No. So the 3D printing technology, especially the direct metal laser sintering process, is a process that's available. You know, there's not many manufacturers making the printing machines at this point. You know, I would say it's a handful of different manufacturers. Penn State has a few research projects they're working on that are a lot more focused on not necessarily the specific technology, but the output and the final product and the capabilities of the final components. You know, so they're doing research for companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing making fighter jet parts, you know, that have to withstand a certain temperature and heat. And you know, if Lockheed Martin is only making 50 fighter jets this year, it's probably cheaper to 3D print one of the components than set up an entire manufacturing supply chain for that specific component. And so there's a lot of those reducing costs for, you know, military and aviation aspects that they're focused on. And that's just one, you know, major focus for them. But as far as the intellectual property of 3D printing goes, you know, that's a really fun realm right now, and all the new stuff that happens every day in 3D printing. But we just worked with Penn State for just a few build plates worth of parts to understand, you know, the capabilities and what could go wrong, you know, like Tyler talked about a little bit. And now our printing gets done in New Jersey by Imperial Machine and Tool, a totally separate company, and they own those machines. So I'm sure those companies that make those machines might have some IP on how those machines are made, but that's not something we have to worry about.
Okay, another question from Mark. Can you elaborate on the movement in the Journeyman series and if you plan to create your own movement?
Yeah, good question. So when we first started out, you know, in college years ago, like I said, we weren't fully educated on you know, what was made in America and what was not, and we assumed that we could find a company that was already manufacturing a movement in America, just like the Swiss movements. And obviously we were incorrect, and still are. And so we've talked to a lot of different movement manufacturers, and you know, part of why we call it the Journeyman series is it, you know, it's going to evolve, you know, as the series progresses, as each movement in each new watch comes together. And so what we really want to do with the Journeyman series, at least the first movement, is find one that's as much made in America as possible. And so we're working with Pinion Precision Technology, Cameron Weiss, Weiss Watch Company in California, in Los Angeles, and he makes the majority of his movements in America. And so we have a few links to his website on ours, and you can find out a little bit more about that. But basic, simple, manually wound movement, not too flashy, and as close to made in America as we can get at this point is really what we're after for that watch.
And as far as our own movement goes, as we progress, we're trying to bring more and more of these processes in-house. We bought a milling machine and a lathe this year to do all of our own machining. Like RT said, we're producing our own dials, and as we go, we want to add more capabilities to what we do in-house. The beginning of making our own modern movement would probably be us machining and finishing our own plates on an existing movement like Cameron's caliber 1003. And eventually someday, yeah, we'd love to create our own movement. That's not necessarily our focus right now, but it will definitely be a slow progression. And our hope for the journeyman as we work with Cameron is to introduce power reserve, which he is currently in the design process of.
Okay. Another question is, how many watch technicians do you currently employ to refurbish watch movements, and how many do you anticipate employing in the future?
So we contract with a handful across the United States, and so we have, I guess, 4 total right now that we work with. One is we have one employee, watchmaker in our shop, Kyle, who does, a lot of our like the heritage movements where people bring them in and they come directly to us. And then, we also work with people who work at those estates or work at the places where we get the movements, and they service them, before they send them to us. So that's a constantly fluctuating supply chain. But we'd love to hire more watchmakers. I think one of the problems I addressed at the end of the presentation was that there aren't very many of them in general. And there's less and less of them coming from schools, and the schools are out there. So we would love to hire as many watchmakers as we possibly can. Obviously, we need them for what we do, and we'll scale that up as we scale up the production of our business.
And the biggest issue is that somebody that's trained at, say, a Rolex facility is a very highly skilled watchmaker and can do almost anything. But the people that we're looking for, working on a modern movement and working on antique pocket watches, isn't really an apples-to-apples comparison. So the individuals that are really highly skilled at working on American pocket watches and have parts reserves and kind of know their way around something that's 100 years old don't want to move and work for us. They have their own shops and they're already set up and established in their own areas. That's one of the biggest reasons we've had to outsource a lot of our watchmaking, and our in-house watchmaker right now ends up just doing more adjustment and final touches, placing hands, things like that, not necessarily the full restoration, because it's impossible to really replicate the skill and knowledge necessary to work on these things in a 100% proper way.
Great question.
And another question kind of follow-up to that is, where are you located, and can an interested person perhaps for your facility?
Yeah, so we're in Fort Collins, Colorado. Our specific address is on the website. It's 517 North Link Lane in Fort Collins, Colorado, just an hour north of Denver. And you're welcome anytime. We're usually there, and we can give you a tour of what we do. And on our website is a list of where all of our other components are made, and I'm sure most of those places will let you in the door too, and you can see how those components are made as well. We're really open about what we do because it's a lot of fun to work on, and we want our customers to know where it comes from and have those stories that they can tell about their watch and how it's made. So come on out whenever. Colorado's a great place to visit.
Great. And I think with that, we'll wrap it up. We've gone about 20 minutes longer than we normally do. I think I answered or went through most of the questions. If there's any I didn't get to, RT will also get a list of all of the questions and your email contacts, so he can respond directly to any further inquiries. I'd just like to remind everyone that the presentation was recorded, so you're able to view it. You'll get an email with a link to it about 24 to 48 hours with that. You're welcome to share that. And remember that the program committee for the NAWCC has organized these monthly webinars, and all the earlier presentations are available from the website, so be sure to check that out. And on behalf of the NAWCC and our presenter, thank you for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.